this rental is $2,000. They're like, I don't think I can get $2,000 for the main floor. I'm like, no, your basement is now renting for $2,000. It would blow their mind.
Thanks for tuning into the Highest and Best Use podcast, where we talk about techniques to optimize your land, structure, skill sets, and time, as well as the highest and best use principles to make your business more profitable and efficient. I'm your host, Ryan Carr, reminding you that good deals are found, great deals are created. Today, we have Guy Sullivan on the show from Penguin Basements in North York. What's up, man? Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
I'm excited about this. We always get a chance to chat like casually or at networking events and things like that. And I'm really excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So highest and best use. For all the listeners who don't know who you are or don't know about Penguin, why don't you start there?
Oh, sure. So I started Penguin in 2011, started actively building basements in 2012. And yeah, we've just been very fortunate in growing into a market which had a lot of GTA, Greater Toronto Area homes that needed finished basements. You know, there's a big housing boom in the 2000s. And so we just followed behind finishing pretty simplistic washrooms and open concepts. And since then we've kind of migrated to more complicated builds like basement apartments, income suite conversions, and expanded our portfolio to service most of the province because there's been a bit of a shortage in new housing starts, you know, pretty much for the past few years through subdivisions. So we've been expanding into Barrie and Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo, Hamilton, Ottawa, and now as of 2022, we are now in London as well. So we're trying to really cover all of the new housing and where people are moving to service the personal use homeowners. And then obviously the investment properties can come up anywhere. So we service them.
You're a machine.
Yeah.
You're everywhere.
Well, everybody's buying everywhere, so we have to be everywhere.
It's true. You know what I love about your model is that because you're everywhere, you get this brand like cross promotion throughout the entire province, like as a whole, like it's a whole unit. So if somebody says, oh, I'm moving to London, I'm moving to Ottawa, I'm moving wherever, like you're already there. You're everywhere.
We saw the benefits of that actually right now. So it's July 2022. And I had a customer that we did their project in Ottawa, I think last year. Yep. And he works for the military and he's moving close to Wasaga Beach. He bought a house and like his base is near there. So he said, I'm moving there, and he doesn't know anybody there. So he just calls us. It's the same price. We basically just doing the whole job for him there, and away they go. There's nothing to think about. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's very cool that people they have family members living in other cities, so they can refer. And our system is all the same, right? So, you know, obviously different labor pool, but the system is the same.
I love it. In terms of highest and best use, how do you determine which markets are best? Like, if you can only be in so many markets, how do you determine which market would provide, you know, the simplest form of construction or the quickest turnaround time for permits, or maybe the most profitable? Like, how do you determine that?
It really comes down to, that's a great question. It really comes down to the labor. So the labor, you know, can I execute that? Can I move? So when you're doing basements, the biggest thing is the framing, the boarding, and the taping. Usually, you know, if you pay the right dollars, you can find a plumber, you can find an electrician, but the building envelope is the most important part. And within the building envelope, you have insulation, mechanical drops, miscellaneous waterproofing, floor level, like little things that those guys can do or oversee while they're completing their tasks. Mm-hmm. So you can't enter a market without framing, boarding, and taping covered, right? And even then, you know, it has its challenges. So the first thing is most of the markets that we service within, let's say from head office North York, whether we have the trades living in those areas or they have to travel from head office, as long as they can put their head down at night at their principal residence, so like an hour and a half drive, hour 20, it's reasonable. We pay the extra mileage, and there's no need to take risks with, you know, unnecessary risks with trades, like local trades. So we frame most of our basements in a day, then we board most of our basements in a day, and we tape most of it. So from a perspective of like a personal use basement where people need the extra space, we're just following them. We're following where the new development is. There really isn't a lot of thought process to it other than the fact that that labor needs to sleep at home. When we opened up in Ottawa, you can't do that anymore. So we relocated some of our staff to handle the framing and the boarding and the taping as we work with local tradesmen. And then we just remodeled it where our finishing supers do a little bit more work, like hands-on, some of the trade work. Mm-hmm. And it just works out really well. And it's always a work in progress, right? So, but that's kind of the idea. So I follow the subdivision homes, and then what happens is usually the income properties are Now, so it's interesting, through COVID, people move to where the income properties are, right? So whether it's Oshawa or Peterborough or Lindsay in the east or Barrie and north, like, so we have subdivision home buyers and income property buyers in the same markets. So it's not really too complicated. We're just following real estate. And we try to expand ourselves by having our own in-house labor, and we just pay for gas and time, and they can't really say no because they're getting paid to travel, right?
That's a good point. Gas and time. I mean, that's usually the two toughest complaints with staff is like, where am I going? How far is it going to be? How long is it going to take? And what's it going to cost me?
Yeah. And they're getting paid once they get beyond a certain boundary, they're getting paid, to be on YouTube, listening to music instead of swinging a hammer. So you just have to be respectful to what's, sharing driving responsibilities if they're going a little bit further. But at the end of the day, our customers need us, and they need to leverage the fact that we're doing, let's say, 1 to 2 projects a day. They need to leverage that volume so that we can have consistent results for construction. Like I said, it's framing in 1 day, electrical and plumbing on the second day. The boarding crew ideally comes 4th or 5th, depending if it's a basement apartment or a regular basement. So because you need the fire separation, and depending how inspections go, and then we pass along the project internally, centrally, as we move from phase to phase.
How many people would you have on in one market, for example? Like let's say your home-based market. How many people would you have on one crew? You'd have a framing crew, a taping crew, and so on. How many people would that make up?
So a framing crew usually has 6 or 7 people.
Yep.
That includes the guy that comes in for mechanical drops.
Mm-hmm.
Electrical and plumbing it's up to them in terms of the size of their crew. But they're the interesting part about that is our mandate is they have 1 day to do it. Now that doesn't always work out because there's major trenching. Like in Ottawa, they ask for 2 days because that's the way it is. It doesn't matter. As long as we board instead of on day 4, on day 5, it keeps it simple. So one of the key ingredients is to have the volume to be able to keep them as single day executions, whether it's a short day or a long day.
How do you get your permit inspections in such a quick turnaround?
The permit or the inspections?
Well, both.
Well, the permits, they used to have a mandate of 10 days for a response or a submission, approval, whatever. So that it didn't really matter because we had our own queue. So, whether it took 60 days or 120 days, depending on the time of year, right? We get a permit in time. Now it's not the case, right? It's pretty unpredictable. So sometimes, we have to delay the job, or we'll start the job like demo, framing, wait for inspections, wait for the thing to come through. But, as long as you communicate it with the customer, like whether they're investor or personal use, like they know what's up, they know what's going on. So it's really up to them whether or not they want us to start and get ready for inspections. But it's funny, you get the permit the next day, you're already calling for inspections. They're seeing the envelopes ready to be boarded.
Yeah.
So they're like, what the hell? I'm like, we're just that fast. So, but
how many people does this take to manage? So if you're in so many markets, obviously you've got teams all over, like in-house and you're at your headquarters, how many people manages this many crews?
It's interesting because it's not crews, right? They're trades, and every trade has their own discipline. So it's not, we never let anybody overreach or overarch an entire project. And that's a lesson. Like it's, as with any manufacturing system or operating system, which is what we think we are, coupled with hospitality. So the customer is supposed to see hospitality, but in the inner workings need to be, more systemized manufacturing model. The toughest part about building this system was, at some point you're relying on project managers on site, and at some point you realize that conversion has to be to a centrally controlled system. So everybody who's decentralized, like your guys in the pickup trucks and the project, they're not going to like the fact that now they have to be scheduled, and now they're treated as, their schedule is compartmentalized until you should only be there for 3 hours, then go there, because it all has to be centrally controlled. Another major problem when you think of them as crews or multiple project managers is if you're sharing in the same resources, whether they're in-house or subs, those subs, let's say, will start working only for the one site manager they like. So the customers that don't have that site manager get a worse experience. And then it's harder to manage job costs because the reason they have a good relationship is either does a really good job of bringing them coffee, maybe doing some work or staying out of their way, or he's communicating to head office, he or she is communicating to head office that, hey, this is an extra $300, this is an extra $800. So they're approving what the other person's not. So by the other person doing their job, they're getting worse service. And so it creates a bit of interpolitics. The right way to do this type of system is inevitably to get to a centralized program, which we're still getting better at, where we control everything in-house. And we have lots of metrics and updates that we do on our CRM to manage the daily flow of changes. And, adoption's a big thing, right? So the one thing was to kind of avoid having site managers, right? Just guys who oversee and supervise.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is trade adoption. So if you go to your sub-trades and say, here's an app, start using it, good luck.
Yeah.
There's different
You said something interesting there. You're trying to avoid having site managers?
Yes.
Okay. Drill down. What does that mean?
I don't avoid site managers. I don't have site managers.
Okay. What does that mean and why?
So again, you're having, first and foremost, every trade knows what they're doing.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't need to oversee a framer who was built up within our own in-house framing crew. They were trained, they were coached, they did this for 3 years. So, like, at least now they're a lead. So meaning they've done hundreds and hundreds of basements. They know how to read drawings and they know what's expected.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're trying to do is get direct communication with the construction manager. Okay. And a site manager can only reflect on the drawings and potentially make changes. Like, if there's an issue with how the shower is going to fit, I want that going directly to the architect, like internal architect that designed it, right? That refined the drawings, or the construction manager, Roberto, that's going to help identify a solution. So if we have to go back to our vendor and change the shower type and communicate quickly with the customer, we essentially are able to, the only site manager is now the construction manager. And by streamlining, that's what we're able to do. So our trades are using our CRM. We also use those 360 virtual tours at the end of each day at strategic times. Mm-hmm. So we can see what they framed. Like, it's not that we don't know what's going on. We know it even better. At 6 p.m., I can go on the computer and I can see exactly what they did. I can see exactly what they ended up doing with the access cover and the opening for the water shutoff. I can see it all. And if there's ever an issue, so I had another interesting thing because we do the 360.
Yeah.
When we took on a customer, it's a job we just wrapped up in Newmarket, a basement apartment. They said that there was like a hairline crack above the brick where the door cut was.
Mm-hmm.
And, my construction manager mentioned, hey, that was there before. And I said, well, we should have disclosed it, but it was so small, it wasn't a big deal. It's whatever. So customer mentioned, like, we think this was cut by the brick cutout. And we went back into the cameras and we showed them that it was there pre-existing.
Yeah, neat.
Because we still fixed it. But the point is, we are not, it's not that we just don't have physical site managers, because we rely on our trades. So our relationship with our trades and our construction manager is extremely efficient. There's strategic times where each one calls in every day. So in the morning, they're looking for updates to make sure that the drawings are exactly as built. And then we check their work at the end of the day or the beginning of the next day, depending how late they finished.
Agree or disagree? You can't scale a business on 7s or below. You got to have 8, 9s, or 10s that work in your company.
You mean in terms of quality?
Yes.
People? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the things I've learned the most is you really have to double down on your best people and the people who are most committed. And don't even look at pay scale. Don't even look at what market salaries are. They're not employees. These are your core people. And so obviously you're going to have it. You can't have the type of staffing that I've had in the past. I need really core strategic people. And then you have to also look at, like, if they're going to help your clients get to their goals and they're going to help you get to your goals, how are you helping them get to their goals?
Sure.
And that's really easy to do when you have like 5 people in your immediate circle and 12 to 15 people in the company that aren't related to direct job costs. So by keeping yourself lean, you're able to pivot and you're able to really focus on the people that you have and where the value add. And you create ride or dies because that's what you project. And also, like, when you have a company that's too big, like, they don't get to communicate. You don't get to communicate with them and they don't get to communicate with you as often. So, there's a lot of misunderstandings and they don't really know what the philosophy is, right? So by keeping it tight and, if we evolve, as we evolve and add new products and services, we're able to do that now in a much tighter manner. And what happens is, if you commit to continuous improvement, the job you did yesterday becomes easier tomorrow. So you consolidate that, and then you're able to add more services or geography or whatever, because we're just rinsing and repeating the same system over and over again.
Right. Right. Do you ever bump into problems with inspectors where they either don't understand your system, or, they come in and they say, "Oh, Penguin, we're not sure about this, or we're not sure how they can do this so quickly." Is that ever an issue?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, inspectors are a big part of our industry, and they always will be. Some of them bring up good points, right? Like, I mean, there's a building code, and everybody has an interpretation of the building code, and then there's human nature, and people want to. I guess socially you'd call it flex, but they want to basically tell you what they know, and they want to this is their job. Their job is to share their opinion, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong, and that conversation is what it's all about, right? So we know the code. The inspection guys that we have, like, we have one in particular per market, like, so we have one in the greater area, then we have one guy that does it in Ottawa, and then we can share that responsibility as well amongst some of the finishing supers, and whomever, really, depending on the severity of the problem. But of course, I mean, inspectors, like I said, sometimes they have valid points. I'm sure some of them have biases, that they know they love our system and they love our speed and they love that they don't have issues. And others might not like our size, and they have buddies in the smaller markets that they prefer. They don't know why they didn't get this job, right? So they're going to let us know, and they're going to drag out some costs, but you've got to expect that if you're going to be doing this type of work, right? And one of the things about us is that, unfortunately, I'm pretty stubborn. So even if a market costs me an extra few $1,000s, like $2,000-$3,000 to close a job, it's not going to discourage me from coming back again the very next day and doing another job, because it's not right. It's not right when certain markets are, I have a situation, and we're remeasuring it now, where there's a walkout, and the inspector comes by and says that some of the stairs are, the concrete are 1/8 of an inch off, on a tread. I'm like,
yeah,
I've never heard of such a thing. And there is a tolerance, from my understanding. So that's obviously, a bit of an issue, but just comes with the territory. And if a customer loses a month's rent and they end up calling me and we have to have a discussion and figure out a resolution, so be it. But you don't go into this business without a bit of risk, and no investor goes into a conversion without some risk and some timeline exposure.
For sure. Is any of your scale, because you've gone with like a really efficient operation, has any of your scale been affected by the margin, or does the margin affect the scale? Like, are they hand in hand, or do they counteract?
That's a great question. The reality is, it's almost, running a business of this type of business is kind of like a circus with with like two parts of it. One, for serving customers and investors, you kind of think of yourself as an economist. So the way it works is, like, I just think of it as like, okay, well, for example, if you're going to buy in Oshawa and now you're moving to Peterborough, I look at my incremental costs to go to Peterborough, and the drive time and the gas and mileage and whatever. And I don't look at that too seriously. I look at it with like one lens. Mm-hmm. And I understand that when I have the purchasing power I do, and I have my in-house labor, it's more expensive to run a system, right? Because, like, I don't pay my guys $20 an hour or whatever the case may be. They all do very well, and they all get the hours that they need to do the job right? So they're not rushed from that standpoint. They are budgeted, but they're not rushed. So, and then I buy flooring in containers. I have pretty good rate. Like, for example, ever since COVID, before COVID, we used to buy from a vendor in the GTA, Greater Toronto Area, which for cabinetry, where they would have standard sizes, 24, 27, 30, so on and so forth. And what happened was, during COVID, they ran out of door faces. I don't know if you experienced this on any of your projects, but
been there. It sucks. Yeah.
Yeah, you're finishing projects and they're out of stock, and God knows when it's coming. So we pivoted over to a custom millwork supplier. It's custom. So I'll never have a supply shock on that again. Worst comes to worst, he can't get the raw material, but he's turning around our millwork in 5 days. And so what happens is, because I'm using his shop and the way we've like navigated his costs together, and I helped him with that, I'm actually, if you walk in his front door, he's a husband and wife shop, mom and pop shop, as you would call it, and you bought the same cabinets installed, you'd be paying way more through him than you're paying through me.
Really? Because of your volume?
Yeah, and that doesn't even count. That's 5 kilometers from their shop, and I've been going 130 kilometers from their shop. So because we're able to streamline that process. So again, the first thing I do is I say to myself, okay, what the thing is, I don't have to develop a new pricing strategy every year because I sold last year. So I know roughly where I need to be. And then I say to myself, okay, it's my job inherently to find new solutions from a cost basis every single year to stay competitive. Not because only I'm worried about new entrants or, whatever the case may be, because you could be looking at it as new entrants, owners can do this work themselves, whatever. But, it's my job inherently as the leader in this industry to say, okay, what can I do? And we can go trade by trade, product by product, and see what we were able to do to mitigate some of the cost increases. Like COVID was a real bummer because I was really on top of all the costs. And to be honest, fully honest, I was prepared to never raise my prices.
Wow.
And you know me, and you know that's true.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because I felt like there was like 3, 5, 7% of inefficiencies that I could constantly find. And we can look at with the changes we've made in the last 3 years through delivering our own metal, getting it cut to the height of the basement, to the debris being picked up and dropped off in 2-yard bins so they get rolled out. Like we can go on and on and on and on. Like the boards are cut to the height of the basements now from the manufacturer. So these are things these are margins, that these are dollars that we would never get back otherwise. So it's important to turn this into that structure. So inevitably you go to the market and stick to the prices that you can stick to, reasonable, right? And constantly be a good solution. So I don't have to lose any sleep about whether or not we're going to maintain our market share. We're going to be as big as we need to be because we should be the best solution.
So you get pre-cut drywall from the manufacturer to the height of the basement?
Yes.
Jeez.
We get those specialty boards shipped in from the States at 90 inches. Now I got a notice to say that that's not going to happen for a little while because the manufacturers don't want to do it. They want to produce 96s, but 90s are normal. In the board that we use is a specialty board for high humid environments. And they use it a lot, for example, in New York City, Manhattan. It's the purple board. Get purple.
Yeah.
And so anyways, it's a product out of the States. And in Manhattan, they get it cut too. They're cut custom sheets because they're not wasting any time bringing debris up and down however it is they bring it up.
That's a really good point. Because if you cut a piece, not only is it the time to cut the piece and fit it, but you got to carry the garbage away.
Yeah, it's not even a big concern about cutting. It's really the garbage. So one of the keys to Penguin is that we don't put bins normally unless it's a duplex conversion, because who cares? But if it's a primary residence, if the job took an extra month, if you're just in the basement, a month is excessive, right? But if you're just in the basement and you're not having the bin out front taking up a driveway, whether it doesn't matter the season, let alone the winter, you're going to get that flexibility from the homeowner and understanding. But if you're invasive and you're not cleaning up after yourself and you have a bin in front and they can't park, and it's just coupling a bad problem. So we normally don't put bins on. We've already pre-calculated all the debris. We have our own vans coming and going they take debris from the trades before sometimes, so the way we backfill, it's all been dude, it's really not that smart. It's just, if you do the same thing in and out every single day, you better have figured it out by now.
I don't know. I'm impressed. I said this about you from day one. The scale and the volume that you do, such, in my opinion, a complicated day of construction and what ifs and all the rest of it that go along with that is it's very impressive. So kudos to Penguin and kudos to you. Last question on basements before we move on. What is it about the basement apartment right now? I feel like there's a changing of the guard in the market where the basement apartment is slowly starting to they're starting to dry up. There's no more unfinished basements. There's no more grandma's bungalows. What's happening with the basement, and is it transitioning into something else?
Oh, that's a great question. To be honest, I mean, from a standpoint of grandma's bungalows and things like that, absolutely. Once the basements have been converted, they're kind of removed from inventory. But historically, a lot of the municipalities only came online with legal basement apartments from like early 2010s, and then they all slowly rolled them all out. So there's a lot of people that through that process and before did not build them legally. And you can see that with listing after listing after listing. So there's a tremendous opportunity to refurbish those and obviously redo them if they're done really poorly. So I don't really believe that there's a lack of inventory. And I think that the other thing is, like, let's say if you're in the greater Toronto area, the standard cost for a separate entrance, excavated, drainage, railings, door, light, it's 20 grand or close. So just you might have to look at, if it's not the bungalow solution with already the side entrance and the split, and you can pretty much design that on the back of your hand on a napkin. We got so used to it. But like, just go into a single family residence, and a lot of single family residents have walkouts in the backyard with a sliding door, and there's a small correction there. So if you're creative and innovative, like, there's always a solution. And I know that people are saying real estate prices went up a lot. I know they've come down a little bit, but as long as you run your numbers and the numbers still work, like, just, you might be surprised by looking at different types of assets as to what you can do with them. That's my first answer. I think, when you're running the highest and best use, that's it. I mean, what do your numbers tell you? Like, what kind of yields are you looking for? What are the mortgages today? I mean, everybody's complaining about real estate prices and interest rates, but why is there not as much conversation about rental rates and how much they've gone up, and what does that do for your portfolio? Like, if I go back in time 6 years ago and talk to some of the early clients that were doing legal basement apartments, go, whoa, wait, this rental is $2,000. They're like, I don't think I can get $2,000 for the main floor. I'm like, no, your basement is now renting for $2,000. It would blow their mind. So that's why there's a common denominator and there's a numerator, and you divide the two, and whatever the yield is the yield, right? So there's lots of opportunities also going out of market, especially if you look at what we do. We'll follow them out of market. But, anytime there's a shakeup in pricing, you just have to redo your math and see where the opportunities are.
Mm-hmm. Rent ratio is huge. I know, rent ratio is huge. And that's where I want to take this next, was garden suites. Mm-hmm. If you look at rent ratio on an up-down duplex versus something with a garden suite, I know you guys are heading in this direction next. Why is the garden suite like the next basement apartment? And what does that do for the finances of the property to justify the cost of that construction?
I think the first thing with any type of development of real estate is to really look at the rental flow in and of itself. There's many variables to put in, but let's just talk rent. So, these duplex conversions right now are getting $4,500 to $5,200, let's say, typical market for up and down conversion, right? Depending where you go. Now, the first so when we add a garden suite, the first thing to do is understand, what is this actual structure? How big is it? And what can we compare it to and evaluate it in terms of rental? So my assessment in and of itself is that, because a lot of times you can build a garden, so basically a backyard bungalow, and a basement to it, you're allowed to add to the footprint. So it's not that you're doing some kind of tiny little shed. We are actually doing 500, 600, 700 square feet, depending on the market, on the main floor, and then the same thing in the lower level. So you're getting, depending on the market, like some of them officially say you can only mandate 2 bedrooms, which is fine, but you could fit 3, you could even fit 4. And now you have a fully built separate legal house. And our focus is on accessibility. So because, the 3, 4, 5 steps that you typically have to get into a bungalow, it's really not helpful for the aging market and the people that need respectable living conditions. So I think the garden suite's a great opportunity to play with the elevations, just have the sill height that you have to work with, and give them a beautiful, lots of natural light. You're designing yourself. You're not as limited with the limiting distances. So natural light from the lot line. So it's a tremendous opportunity. So essentially, if you're normally renting for $3,000 or close upstairs, I assume that's what you're going to get at least in your backyard bungalow. It's a full house, autonomous, as long as the lot supports it. So you can be pushing $7,500 to $8,000 in rent. And then we go back and see, okay, well, what's my cost of borrowing? And maybe because the returns on the garden suite are so great, you can consider alternative lending for the entire project, or like the entire asset and renovation,
right?
Or just for part of it. But step one is creating the rental flow. Step two is you'll drive your costs down. And I know a lot of people do the BRRRR strategy. They find an opportunity, they invest the capital and hope to pull all, most, or even some profit out and move on to the next property. Now, if you're innovative, it's tough to do that because the appraisals are coming in. You're really exposed to a potential appraisal coming in at like not understanding the garden suite, or I've heard from some people saying that they don't, that the appraiser doesn't even add it.
Yeah, that was so common. It still is common even in the market now. People are going, like the third house, like we don't recognize that. And you're like, well, I have a building permit for this. Why don't you recognize that? Like what's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, like, then I've heard other projects where, you're buying the assets, and like one in Aurelia where it was bought for $600. They did the garden, they did the main floor, got an appraisal for 1.4. So, and so just for disclosure, as it currently sits, as where I see the cost structure is the garden suite, top and bottom. Let's say you're building 1,200, 13, 14, 11, whatever, in that ballpark of suite. I think that could be built for about $250,000 plus tax, so the fully functional home, and that's a good value, as you know from your experience. And that's
structure? Is that strictly structure?
Everything done, utilities, everything.
Okay. So what about grading? What about landscaping? What about a driveway? How does that fall? Ripping up a deck, things like that.
Everything. So again, as I build more and more of these, I'm open to being 5, 10, 15% off, right?
Yeah.
But when you have investors or homeowners or whatever the case may be, we want to disclose, line by line what the cost can be. And then as we work through certain projects in certain municipalities, we always tell them keep aside 5 or 10%, because it's not like a basement, which we can close our eyes and we did the house next door and across the street. We got to work together.
Oh, by the way, you have to fill in my swimming pool when you're done. Like, exactly. Like we didn't tell you about that. Oh, fill in
exactly. So we work through that, but my assessment on the design and what we're trying to do is about $250,000 plus tax, and that goes from the same philosophy as basements. Like, this is a great solution at that price point. Mm-hmm. If at the end of the day this is built in 2023 and it's $275,000, so be it. And if I can do it for $240,000, I'll do it. I don't need the extra capital. So just whatever works. So what happens is, between the garden suite, the basement apartments are usually about $100,000, like plus or minus, just that's what it is. So we're looking at $350,000, and then we could usually incorporate the miscellaneous cosmetic work that needs to be done to the main dwelling. So you can kind of like shop around at whatever the market price is in the area that you are, and budget about $350,000. That would get a garden suite, basement apartment, and whatever needs to be touched up.
Mm-hmm. Love it. You said something interesting. This was years ago, and it always stuck with me. You mentioned that, I think you're platform speaking somewhere, and you had said that the reason that you can do basements in such a cookie cutter model is because it's a defined space. You got 4 walls, you have a ceiling, you're playing within that, right? Yes. And I thought, wow, that's really intuitive. I never saw it like that. And now that you're saying these similar characteristics about about a coach house, it's a defined space. Like, this is your footprint.
That's right.
It's a basement apartment stuck on top of each other. It's the same.
Yeah, so that's why people look at it the same. They're like, why don't you build a laneway suite above a garage? And the immediate answer is no. If you tell me to build a 20-story apartment building, you have a higher chance of me saying yes, even though I can't do it, than building a lane. It just doesn't make sense. It just, if you just think of it as Lego, where do you stage? You're interrupting flow of traffic. Like, I'm not interested. That's meant for the small guys who are going to be on site, that have planned it out, higher margins. It's not for me.
Yep. I love it. What's next for you guys other than garden suites? Is there anything else you guys, I heard something about Penguin Condo at one point.
Well, yeah. So we dabbled in condos. We've done We've done a few. Bit of challenges with the elevator, property managers, existing infrastructure. I didn't like it as much. I mean, we still do some, but not much. The garden suites are really our principal focus right now. I think when we look at whether it's the basement apartments, the garden suites, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to really look at housing holistically. And I know you've done that in your past and present, Ryan, and producing properties and whatever the case may be. But there's certain anomalies and certain inefficiencies in the housing market, particularly in Southern Ontario and Southwestern Ontario, that I can't make sense of, right? And so we look at, like, there's no new subdivision homes in the 905s right now. Nothing to note. There's a bit going on in Brampton. There's a bit going on in Durham, but at the end of the day, these garden suites are a tremendous opportunity to add to the housing stock. Now, whether it's investors going in and they're going to produce 3 units and that's better than one, or it's individual owners that want, have family members or looking to offset some of the expenses. Like, I think just like I was living and breathing in basements for 10, 11 years now, and obviously the conversions came as part of that. The garden suites they're going to have quite a long run at maximizing the utility of the space. I mean, people are talking about backyards and stuff. Some of these backyards are 130, 150, 160 feet deep. Tremendous opportunities to build garden suites. And then somebody might say, oh, well, how would this lot look with only 100 feet now if you put a garden suite in the back? But you look at every developmental project and they're only putting out 75-foot lot deep, 85, and they're putting whatever type of structure, 3,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. So if you don't do it, the big 7 developers are going to do it, right? And they're going to do it in a different type of housing. So I think that's really where we want to focus, and we obviously doing it in our own projects. We want to do it for investors. We want to open people's eyes to what it can do for them and their personal lives, and open that up. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity to be a leader in that space too, and that's kind of where we're going. I think at the end of the day, we'll be producing other types of housing projects, whether it's single family homes and multi-res, and as long as it serves investors and, at the end of the day, most importantly, the end user. Like, we don't build illegal basement apartments. We're not interested in cutting corners from a strategic standpoint or labor, or whatever. So, like, as long as people are doing it legally, properly, and we're serving the communities, like, we just want to put out more housing stock to make it more affordable to live. And then once we get through the garden suites and make it systemized and help people, then we're going to look at multi-res and single family dwellings and add to the stock there. And because the way it's working, it just doesn't make sense. Like, when the market was hot, people were paying over $1 million in most markets for townhouses. And you and I both know the construction costs. So reverse engineering is like this has been a systematic problem probably for 50, 60, 70 years that we have to figure out how to reverse engineer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love it, man. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anybody else that you'd recommend to come on the show and follow in your footsteps?
Oh yeah, there's so many. I mean, you've had Quentin come on.
I've got Quentin lined up. Yeah, he's coming on next.
Okay. Have you had Colby Marshall?
Colby Marshall.
Have you had Monica Jasic?
Monica Jasic. I'll reach out to both of them, get them on the show.
Have you had Andy Tran?
I haven't had Andy Tran yet. I'll get Andy on too.
Who else? You want me to keep going?
No, that's great. 3 people.
I have more, obviously.
I believe you.
Go Nick from Rockstar Real Estate.
Who?
Nick from Rockstar Real Estate.
Nick Rockstar? Okay.
And Sandy McKay.
Sandy? I've been on their podcast a few times. Great guys. Great.
Everybody's great in this industry. It's like,
for sure. I love it. Where can people?
Michael Dominguez.
Dominguez? I love it. Right, awesome, buddy. Man. Thank you. Where can people find out more about you?
Oh, so if you're looking for a basement, it's basementscanada.com. You can probably navigate to our garden suites from there too. But Penguin Basements, Penguin Garden Suites, and if you look me up, Guy Solomon, you'll find me. And every customer that calls in, as you may know, they go through my assistant Ryan, and then I talk to every single potential project. So I make sure that I have a good understanding of what their needs are and see if it's something that we can address before we put it through the pipeline.
Love it. Awesome. Thanks for coming on, buddy.
Thanks for having me. All the best.
Thanks for tuning into the Highest and Best Use podcast. Don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe. Just a reminder, good deals are found, great deals are created, and we will see you on the next episode.